What is going on, everyone? It is about 11 Central Time. As you can see, I got my nice shades because, I saw Jaden Daniels and I saw Marvin Harrison Jr., and they were all rocking them, so I figured I should rock them, right? But we are here. We've got a draft recap, PWTB draft recap. Like I said, 11 Central right now. This is Thursday night. We will get this video up by Friday. And I just wanted to give a fresh reaction because it was the first round went as expected, really, to start out, but there was definitely a lot of crazy stuff going on. We'll go over just my biggest takeaways. I want to go over obviously the six quarterbacks that are taken, which I do believe is a record. For sure, six in the first 12 picks is a record. I know they went over that. And then I want to go over a little bit about some of the players that I thought were reaches. I have a couple receivers on there for sure. Some of the players who fell out of the first round completely. And then I want to go over just some fun tidbits I saw over the night. So, the five biggest storylines I think of tonight's draft. The first four picks went exactly as most people thought they would. If you've read a mock draft or anything leading up to today, of course, the three quarterbacks, which we'll get to in a little bit, and then the Cardinals took Marvin Harrison Jr. But the first pivot point, the first true pivot point, we thought would be two with Washington. It was actually five with the Chargers because it was rumored that the Vikings might get worried that JJ McCarthy might slide away. Obviously, that didn't happen. That they might trade up with the Chargers to go get JJ McCarthy. Or maybe the Chargers would trade with someone else. Maybe the Giants, I heard, were possibly coming up for a quarterback. But and the Chargers were rumored, you've got Justin Herbert. You just lost an aging Keenan Allen. He's now in the Bears. Where are you guys going to get the receiver, right? And but they held strong and they went with Joe Alt, who I believe is definitely a top five in terms of talent player in this draft. They went with him and tackle, and I think that was a really good pick for the Chargers because you've got Jim Harbaugh there. He's been a winner, and I know you want the flashy receiver, but the Chargers have had that forever. They've had Mike Williams, they've had Keenan Allen, they've had good quarterbacks, they've had Antonio Gates, Philip Rivers. They've had all these guys, and they still can't. Vincent Jackson, and they still can't get it done because you got to have the guys up front. You got to have a defensive line. Defense in general has been a problem for the Chargers. So a non-flashy pick, I think, was a great move for the Chargers. So Joe Alt at 5 was a big pivot point. I think Malik Neighbors at 6 for the Giants was a big pivot point for me too. It was expected that they'd possibly take a receiver, but we started hearing all these rumors about a quarterback with the Giants, which is a little bit interesting because they just paid Daniel Jones, you know, all this money. However, and he hasn't done as well. But he's going into year 6. How many more years are you going to attach to him if you don't think he's the guy? And I kind of think the Giants have lost faith in him. But you know what? He's decent enough. He had a good year 2 years ago, Daniel Jones in 2022. Let's just get him a receiver, another LSU receiver. Of course, Odell Beckham was an LSU first round pick that went to the Giants, and he had a good couple of years, of course. So let's get him a big play receiver. Let's just see what happens. Give him another playmaker, especially now that there's no more Saquon Barkley. So I thought that was an interesting point. Obviously, Michael Penix, and I'm going to dive more into this once we get to the quarterbacks, but nobody saw that coming. No mock draft, no nothing. I guess he had a couple of visits to Atlanta, but even Kirk Cousins, we're hearing all these reports. Now I'm starting to hear reports that Kirk Cousins is upset. I just heard that he was stunned at first. Stunned is the word they used. Now I'm starting to see ESPN headlines that are popping up that he's upset. I'm sure we'll learn way more about this. Nobody saw this coming. We'll dive more into this when we get to quarterbacks, but that was a big pivot point. The NFC North, everyone but the Packers in the NFC North. And I know the Packers, they got a tackle, they got a good pick there. But the NFC North has really improved. The Vikings had a big day, obviously drafting JJ McCarthy at 10. But then they trade up to get Dallas Turner at 17, who some thought was the best defensive player in the draft. The Lions trading up to get Terrion Arnold with the 24th pick. And obviously he had a very hype reaction, but many thought he was the number one cornerback in the draft. And then obviously the Bears with Rome Odunze and Caleb Williams number 1 overall. This is not the NFC North, we've seen sort of the last 20 years where once in a while the Lions might the Lions might do good, or the Vikings might do good for a little, and the Bears do good, and then the Packers are like, all right, let's settle down. We're the champs of the North. I'm not, and the Packers are still a very well-rounded team. Obviously, we saw it with Jordan Love, but they're not the dominant force anymore. This is going to be a very interesting division. So my last big takeaway is, how about those Kansas City Chiefs? We thought Xavier Worthy was going to fall to them at 32. But they maybe got nervous about it. I don't know. They climb up to 28 and go get him. And that is just unfair because they don't have to pay him much of anything for 4 to 5 years. He could be another Tyreek. I'm not saying for sure. He could be another Tyreek Hill part two. You don't have to pay him much. You got Kelsey and you got Mahomes who can just pop it up, 80, 70 yards downfield. So that's a steal right there. So those are my biggest takeaways from the draft. We'll go straight to the quarterbacks. So obviously Caleb Williams at number 1, Jaden Daniels at 2, Drake May at 3. Based on everything up to date today, like I said at the beginning, it seemed like this is how it was going to play out. Now, Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, I have the exact same thing to say on. They were great in college. I don't see a generational talent. When I think of generational talent, I think of Andrew Luck. I think of Peyton Manning. And Trevor Lawrence, of course, had that title. He hasn't completely lived up to that yet, but in terms of the talent, for sure, I don't see that in Caleb Williams. I don't see that in any of these guys to call him a generational talent, but very, very talented quarterbacks. But with those two specifically, what I'm going to say is that I think, again, I think they've got the weapons now. I think Caleb Williams more so. They just gotta, and it was the right pick, but now it's up in the air of how much they can live up to their title. And I think that's still up for debate. But I think it was the right pick for sure. Now Drake May is where I wonder if it was the right pick at number 3. I think Drake May, he was I believe he was the ACC Player of the Year in 2022, so 2 years ago. May pops up. So he's not, I know I've said this in the past and it's a little unfair. I've said he's Trubisky 2.0 because he went to North Carolina and all that. That's a little unfair because he's played more games and he's had a little more success than Mitchell Trubisky. And he can make all the NFL throws. However, I just I don't know what's so special about him, especially compared to the other guys that went. What made him that he had to be a top 3 pick? I think the Patriots, they could have traded back and got a little more because I think the Patriots roster is a little depleted, and that's a big thing to consider too. Like I said, the Bears and even the Commanders are a little more set. I think the Patriots could have benefited from a little more picks. So I was a little confused on that. But they take him at 3, and that's their guy. So I could, and by the way, I'm not saying Drake May is going to be a guaranteed bust. I don't think any of those 3 are guaranteed to disappoint, but I think, I think he's got more to prove than the others. And then Michael Penix Jr. at 8. So with Kirk Cousins, you got to take a step back here almost. So you pay, it's not even the mentoring thing. Obviously, Kirk Cousins is 36 years old. He's getting up there, but it's not even about that. It's just about you paid him that ginormous contract, 4 years, $160 million. When is Penix gonna, or not? Yeah, when is Penix gonna play? Year 3, year 4? And have we seen this in the past? Yeah, Aaron Rodgers, but that was 20 years ago. And you've seen in the age of all these teams being so impatient with their quarterbacks, I hope the Falcons have a plan. Let's just put it this way. Because if they don't, it's going to turn into a disaster. Cousins is going to get dissatisfied. And, obviously you want him to lead you to the playoffs. And then Penix might get dissatisfied too. So if they play this right, I'm okay with it because Penix has crazy talent. His arm is crazy, and Kirk Cousins is the guy to win now. But, man, I really hope they know what they're doing because if one person gets mad and they blow it up, then this is not going to go well. J.J. McCarthy, I thought, a lot of people thought the Vikings would trade up for him. They only had to trade up one spot for him. That ended up working out pretty well for them. Again, I think they had the player comp they had for him was a pretty good one. Alex Smith, that's exactly what I see with J.J. McCarthy too. Great skill set. Is he going to be a Mahomes? Probably not. But can he be a winning quarterback in the NFL? For sure. And I think the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell is a good place to go for him. So again, and then Bo Nix. And this is a lot of people are saying this is a reach. I do agree this is a little bit of a reach. However, you do have Las Vegas, who is right there at 13, who might have also wanted a quarterback. So it's a little bit of a reach, but all these teams sort of did have to reach. Otherwise, they were going to get closed out like the Raiders did, and maybe a couple other teams, maybe the Rams I've heard were possibly interested in a quarterback. So they had to do what they had to do. So I don't see any for sure bust here in the quarterback aspect. It's just some of them are going to have to, a lot of them, so to speak, did get overdrafted a little bit, and they're going to have to live up to it. But so let's go just a couple other players that I feel were a little overdrafted tonight. Two receivers. This one might get some pushback. I think Rome Odunze was a tiny bit. The Bears got to be cautious about this. So the Chicago Bears have, first of all, I don't understand why they didn't consider offensive line. I thought there was a lot of really good offensive line prospects. But they go with Odunze, who's flashy for sure. He's a great red zone target. He's a big, strong receiver. He's not gonna be one of those guys who gets jabbed by the cornerback, those new college receivers who get jammed by the cornerback right away. He's a physical receiver. He's a little slower though for a receiver. He's about a 4.5, which is still very fast, but it's not like Malik Neighbors fast. It's definitely not like Xavier Worthy's fast. And can he still win those end zone battles for the Bears in the NFL? I do think it's a little bit of a risk. But again, I like the flashy moves with him and Williams. It's just a little bit to be seen. And then I really thought at the reach at the end of the draft, like right before I was about to get on, was Rick Pearsall from Florida, wide receiver. He's going to San Francisco. And I thought again, he had a really good college career, but sometimes, and I tell Jake this because he loves his boy Bo Nix, sometimes a very good college career does not translate to a very good NFL career. That's not necessarily a guarantee. So I wish Pearsall the best, but you had a bunch of other receivers on the board. And with the 49ers especially, you already got Deebo Samuel. I know Ayuk might be leaving. You got Deebo Samuel, you got McCaffrey. I thought there might have been other needs, so I thought that was a reach too. Those are my two other reaches. And then let's talk about some players that just fell out completely, fell out of the first round. I think you got to look at Kool-Aid McKinstry. There was a little bit of run on cornerbacks finally towards the end. You had obviously Terrion Arnold go to the Lions. You had Quinion Mitchell go to the Eagles at 22, even before that. And then you had right at the end, the Ravens got Nate Wiggins from Clemson at 30, which is good. That's how they thought the board would stack. But Kool-Aid McKinstry, who I thought might be in the 20s, he was mocked in the 20s, early 20s, maybe late 20s, falls out. So he will probably be an early Browns early second round pick. And then a couple receivers, like I was talking about, I was surprised to see the Niners not take. Adonai Mitchell, who was supposed to be in the 20s from Texas, even before his buddy Xavier Worthy, but obviously the speed factor for Worthy probably got him drafted in the first round. I was surprised to see Mitchell not go, and I was surprised to see Ladd McConkey not go. There was a lot of hype around Ladd McConkey from Georgia, wide receiver, and I'm sure he'll go earlier in the second round too. And then just last one, what about Cooper DeJean? Or I don't know exactly how to pronounce that. Cornerback from Iowa, who's going to transfer or probably be more of a safety in the NFL. I was surprised not because he was mocked in like the teens. I think he fell a little more back. I think most people's big boards, he was about more like 24, 25. But I really thought that he would go for sure. So out of all the ones I just listed, I'm most surprised that he did not go in the first round. So he slides to the second. And then but yeah, and just a couple tidbits I noticed before we get going. The Rams get to pick. They made their first round pick since 2016, and which you got to think about that, because a team gets every year they get a first round pick, at least one, unless if you traded away, of course. And for example, the NFL draft in 2020 wasn't canceled, so that's a legit 8 years that they didn't have first round picks. I know they traded to get Jalen Ramsey. They had some other trades in the past, and it actually worked out because they got a Super Bowl a couple years ago. But I thought that was interesting. Their first round pick, and they got the defensive end at 19 from Florida State. I forget his name, but that was a very good pick. And then the selfie stick, I thought that was interesting. I thought there was with the selfie stick, Caleb Williams did it first, and then everyone else who was in the green room was able to do that. I don't think I've ever seen that before, where they actually go down with the fans and kind of interact. So that was pretty cool. And I didn't the green room. I didn't even really see a lot of like. Usually, I know not every player goes to the green room is in the first round, but there was like most of them were not there. So I thought that was interesting. I thought right at the end of the first round, Xavier Leggett, when he went to Carolina, I guess they said on broadcast that Carolina made a promise that I think Allegiance, how you pronounce it, by the way. They made a promise to him that he would go in the first round, or not go in the first round, because Carolina had the first pick of the second round. They made a promise that he would go to them, and he's like, okay, all right, we'll see. But they traded up to 32, and they made good word of their promise. So good for Carolina. They had a lot of holes they needed to fill. And then I chose to watch, this is an interesting one. I chose to watch NFL Network's broadcast, mainly because I like Rich Eisen. I think he gives very good insight to the draft. I thought Daniel Jeremiah did a pretty good job with his big board. I thought it was pretty accurate. I know the cornerbacks were a little late to the game and some other minor stuff, but I thought his big board was pretty accurate. And then the other hosts they had on were good too. I heard ABC was doing one apparently with like the college football broadcast, like the Kirk Herbstreit and all them. I don't think they've ever done an NFL draft, so that seems kind of interesting. And then obviously ESPN always did theirs, but I'm not really a huge fan of Mel Kiper. I think he gives good advice, but he lets his personal opinions get way too into it. I thought Mike Mayock, when he used to do the draft for NFL Network, was a lot more fair. But Mel Kiper, again, he clearly knows what he's talking about. Don't get me wrong, but like he lets his personal opinions. He's like, well, this guy's gonna suck and yada yada, and it's like, okay, but just tell us like just tell us about the pick a little more, and then you could go a tiny bit into that. But it's his big moment, getting drafted in the NFL. You don't gotta. So Mel Kiper, I'm not a huge fan of. More of a fan of Rich Eisen and their crew. And then I guess Bill Belichick did draft coverage with Pat McAfee. I'm gonna watch clips of that because I didn't watch that. I just watched NFL Network. Some of my buddies were telling me about Belichick he was a little amazed by the Pat McAfee crew. If you've ever seen them on ESPN, they're definitely we'll just say they're definitely a different generation than what Bill Belichick is accustomed to. But no, I'll be looking forward to check that out. Anyways, though, that's my draft recap. I think we'll call it there. By the way, for our YouTube channel, if you look in our biography, just click on our channel and go to the biography. You'll see information. We're putting upcoming shows. So like whenever we do a main show or a special like this, we're putting the dates when we're going to do the show. I don't think we have anything up right now, just today's, of course. But in the future, you'll be able to see, when we're recording next, and we'll try to keep that updated regularly. But for now, about 11:15 now. So hope everyone has a good night, and we will be watching round 2, 3, and the rest of the draft with some great interest.